Ever get that sinking feeling? You know, when your like super smart AI chatbot suddenly seems, well, I don't know, less than smart.
Yeah.
Like you ask it about something that happened last week and it's drawing a total blank.
Right.
Or even worse, it gives you information that's like totally outdated.
Yeah, I've been there.
Talk about an awkward moment.
The problem. And it's not just chatbots either. This whole issue of AI models getting, stale, it can happen in all kinds of applications.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you need your AI to, stay on top of the absolute latest information.
And that is where the magic of retrieval-augmented generation comes in.
RAG.
RAG. Exactly. I love a good deep dive into, like, the cutting edge of AI, and trust me, a RAG is where it's at.
It's huge.
We've got a fantastic resource here. RAG techniques. From naive to advanced. Are you ready to unlock some next-level AI brilliance with me?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Let's do this.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay.
Our RAG is a game changer. Like, it really is. Because it lets AI models access and process information in real time. So we're going way beyond the limits of their initial training data.
So instead of your AI being stuck in the past, like that friend who still thinks it's 2019,
Right.
our RAG lets it tap into the freshest, most relevant data available. I mean, think up-to-the-minute news, the latest research publications, even internal documents specific to your company.
I love it.
Right.
All at your AI's fingertips. It's like giving your AI a direct line to, the pulse of the world.
I love that.
Constantly updating, constantly learning with the most current information.
Okay, I'm already seeing the potential here. So imagine you're working on a marketing campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know, like, the very latest trends in your industry.
Yeah.
With R, your AI can sift through, like, mountains of data, from social media feeds to market research reports, and it can give you the insights you need, like, right when you need them.
Exactly. It's all right there. Or let's say you're developing a new medical diagnosis tool.
Mm-hmm.
R can actually make sure that your AI is always using the most up-to-date research in clinical trials. And that obviously leads to much more accurate and reliable results.
This is huge. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's break down how ARGA actually works, because I have a feeling there's some serious ingenuity going on behind the scenes.
Oh, you're absolutely right. There is. At its core, RAG is a three-part system. First, you have what's called the retriever. Think of it like a superpowered research assistant.
Okay.
Whose only job is to dig up the most relevant information from a massive, and I mean massive, knowledge base.
Okay, so the retriever finds the good stuff, but where is it even looking?
That's where the second part of the system comes in.
Yeah.
The knowledge base itself. This is where all that valuable information is stored, often in it's called a vector database.
A vector database. Okay, now it sounds like we're getting into some serious data wrangling territory.
We are, but trust me, it's a good thing. Vector databases are specifically designed to handle massive amounts of data, and they retrieve information with lightning speed. Think of it like, I don't know, like organizing a library so that every single book is instantly searchable, no matter how many, millions of books you have.
Okay, that's a powerful analogy.
Right.
So the retriever scours this perfectly organized knowledge base using the user's query as a guide. But then what? How does this information actually become useful to, like, you and me?
Right. So that's where the third part of this whole system steps in. The generator. This is usually a large language model, or LLM, that takes the information, retrieved from the knowledge base and then crafts a coherent, contextually relevant response.
So it's like a relay race. The user asks a question, the retriever grabs the information, hands it off, and then the generator shapes it into a useful answer, and boom, knowledge delivered.
Boom. Yes. A perfect summary.
Nailed it.
And while this basic RAG framework, it is incredibly powerful just as it is, researchers have actually been developing even more advanced techniques to make it even smarter, more accurate, and way more adaptable.
Which is what we're about to delve into, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm already sensing that RAG is like an onion. Layers upon layers of fascinating complexity.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we peel back those layers, I think it's time to take a quick pause and let our listeners absorb all this R goodness.
I agree. I think a moment to process is always a good thing.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, but trust me, this is just the beginning.
Okay, so we've got the basic RG system down, but I am so ready to dive into those advanced techniques you mentioned.
Can we do?
Because, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good AI upgrade?
Absolutely. And one of the most crucial places that researchers have been really focusing their efforts is something called chunking.
Chunking?
Chunking, yeah.
Okay, it sounds a bit like we're prepping veggies for, like, a massive AI stew or something?
Well, there's definitely some chopping and dicing involved.
Okay.
You see, when we feed information to our AI, we can't just, dump a whole encyclopedia in at once and just expect it to make sense of everything.
Right, right. Even the most powerful AI probably needs a little organization, right?
Exactly. That's where chunking comes in. It's all about dividing the information up into smaller, more manageable chunks that the AI can actually process effectively. Think of it like this. If you were trying to learn, I don't know, like a brand new language, you wouldn't try to memorize the entire dictionary at once, would you?
No, definitely not.
You'd probably break it down into smaller groups of words or phrases.
Okay, that's a much more manageable way to think about it. But how do we actually figure out, like, the ideal chunk size for our AI? Because if it's too small, are we going to lose some important context? And if it's too big, are we back to that information overload problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's all about finding that, that sweet spot. And the best way to chunk your data, it really depends on the type of data you're working with.
So different data, different chunking strategies. Okay, I got it. Can you give us an example of how this works in practice?
Yeah, for sure. Let's say you're working with, we were talking about news articles before.
Yeah.
A really simple approach would be to chunk the information by paragraph.
Okay.
But, and this is important, you could get way more granular if you wanted to,
Yeah.
right? You could chunk by sentence or even by phrases, just depending on how much detail your AI actually needs to retain.
So the chunking strategy can really impact how much detail, like how much nuance our AI picks up on.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some other ways that we can kind of like optimize this whole process?
Well, sometimes it's not just about the size of the chunks, but it's about how we actually group them together. And this is where techniques like semantic chunking come into play.
Semantic chunking.
Yeah.
Okay, intrigued.
It's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of just dividing the text based on punctuation or, formatting, semantic chunking uses AI to actually identify chunks that are related to each other in meaning.
So it's like the AI is acting as an editor, almost, like grouping similar ideas together to help with comprehension?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you've got like a super long document with tons of information on different animal species.
Okay.
Semantic chunking could group all the information about, let's say, lions together,
Okay.
and then all the information about elephants together.
Got it.
Right, so on and so forth.
That would make it much easier for the AI to understand information about a specific animal, right? Instead of having all those little bits and pieces just like scattered throughout this massive document.
Exactly. And this brings us to another really, really important part of our vague indexing.
Indexing. Okay. Now, this one sounds a little bit more familiar. Isn't that what we do with those like massive libraries, the dusty old books?
You're on the right track.
Yeah.
Just like a library index helps you quickly find specific books, right?
Right.
Indexing in R helps the AI quickly find the most relevant chunks of information in that huge knowledge base we've been talking about.
So instead of like leafing through every single page, we've got a shortcut to the good stuff.
Precisely. And just like in a library where the books are organized by subject and author and title, in R, we use something called vectors to organize and index our chunks of information.
Vectors. Okay. Is it just me, or are we about to enter the matrix?
Not quite.
Okay.
Although it can sound a little sci-fi. Basically, vectors are mathematical representations of words or phrases or even entire chunks of text.
Okay. So we're basically translating human language into something that an AI can understand and then work with.
Exactly. And the really cool thing about vectors is that they let us actually measure similarity.
Oh, okay.
So we can take a user's question, turn that into a vector, and then very, very quickly compare that vector to all the other vectors representing every single one of our chunks of information.
Got it.
The ones that are the closest matches are most likely to have the info the user is actually looking for.
That's so clever. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, but instead of using like a magnet or something, we're using math.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. And just like there are tons of different types of libraries, from your little local branch to the Library of Congress, there are a bunch of different approaches to indexing in RISE.
So what are some of our options when it comes to choosing like the right indexing strategy for the job? So last time we left off, you were about to tell us about all the different approaches to indexing.
Right.
And I mean, some are simple. Some sound really, really complex. Like, where do we even begin?
Well, it's like choosing the right library, right?
Right.
Like it all depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So the best indexing strategy for your RG system depends on, how big is your knowledge base?
Yeah, okay.
How complex is the information you're dealing with?
So for a smaller knowledge base, we probably don't need to like build the AI equivalent of the Library of Congress, right?
Exactly. You can keep it simple. A simple approach is probably going to be more than enough.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're working with like millions, even billions of data points,
Yeah.
that's when things get really, really interesting. That's when these powerful vector databases we've been talking about, that's where they really shine. They can handle those massive scales and still give you crazy fast retrieval speeds.
Okay, so we've chunked our information, we've indexed it, made it nice and organized, like a well-organized library.
Right.
But how do we actually make sure that our AI is retrieving the absolute best information for whatever task it's working on?
Yeah, this is where things get really sophisticated.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how the retriever uses the user's query, to go and find similar chunks of information, right?
Right.
But finding similar stuff, it's not always enough. We really need to make sure the AI is pulling the most relevant information.
Yeah.
And that is where techniques like reranking come into play.
Re-ranking. Okay, so it sounds like we're giving those retrieved chunks of information like a second interview just to make sure they're like the absolute perfect fit for the job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine you're trying to hire someone new at your company.
Okay.
You might get hundreds of applications, right?
Yeah.
And you could use a really basic screening process to narrow it down to, like, let's say the top 10 candidates based on their resumes.
Right.
But to find the absolute best fit, you'd probably want to do like a round of interviews.
Of course, yeah.
Right. Get a much deeper understanding of their skills, their experience. See if they're actually a good fit for your company culture.
Totally, yeah. That makes sense. So re-ranking is like the interview process. But for our retrieved information, we're not just looking at like surface level similarity anymore. We're really digging into the details to make sure we've got like the best of the best.
You got it. Re-ranking uses more sophisticated AI models. These are called cross-encoders. They basically reevaluate the pieces that were initially retrieved based on, that basic similarity.
Okay.
These cross-encoders, they can consider all sorts of things like the context of the query, the coherence of the information. They just make sure that the absolute most relevant and accurate chunks, they rise to the top.
Wow. So it sounds like re-ranking adds like a whole other level of intelligence and precision to the retrieval process.
It really does. And this is where things get really, really cool.
Oh.
Because once we've got those top-ranked chunks of information, that's when we can start to get even more strategic about how we select and use them to create like the absolute most helpful response possible.
Okay, I am very intrigued. It sounds like we're moving beyond just simple retrieval and almost into the realm of like AI decision making.
We are.
Tell me more.
Okay, so think about it this way. You wouldn't read an entire book to try to answer a really simple question, would you?
No.
We don't always need to feed our AI every single piece of information that it retrieves.
Right.
And that is where context selection comes in.
Context selection. So we're teaching our AI to like read between the lines, figure out what's truly important and what can just be left out.
Exactly. There are actually a few different approaches to context selection, but they all have the same goal. It's all about identifying the most important pieces of information, from those chunks that we've retrieved and filtering out anything that's not super relevant to the actual question that was asked.
So it's like giving our AI a set of highlighters and saying, okay, focus on the key takeaways. You can ignore all the rest of the noise.
Exactly. And this is where the power of our RAG really shines. By combining all of these things, these sophisticated retrieval techniques, intelligent re-ranking, strategic context selection, we can build these AI systems that aren't just good at finding information, they're good at understanding it and synthesizing it and actually using it in ways that are meaningful.
This is incredible. I mean, we're basically training AI to think more like human experts, right?
That's exactly what makes our RAG such a game changer. It's not just about making AI smarter. It's about making it so much more useful, more adaptable, and ultimately way more capable of actually solving real-world problems.
It's so exciting to just think about the possibilities here.
Yeah.
But before we get totally carried away, let's, bring it back to our listeners for a second.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways that you want them to walk away with today?
I think first and foremost, I want them to understand that our RAG, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
It's more of a framework, a set of tools, a set of techniques that can be tailored to specific needs and challenges. So the most important thing is to really understand what problem are you trying to solve.
That makes sense. Don't just use RAG because it's like the cool new AI thing, right?
Right. Exactly. Make sure it's the right tool for what you want to do. And once you know what your goals are, don't be afraid to play around a little. Experiment with different techniques, different approaches. The world of ag is constantly changing. So stay curious. keep learning. Never stop, pushing the boundaries of what your AI can do.
Those are words to live by in the world of AI. A huge thank you to you for joining us today and for, breaking all of this down. It's been an amazing deep dive into the world of retrieval-augmented generation.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's always so much fun to dive into these topics with you.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the amazing world of AI.